Hello, and welcome to Aging Out Loud, the official podcast of NYC Aging. I'm your host, Lorraine Cortés-Vázquez, Commissioner of New York City Department for the Aging. This is where we talk about the real experiences of growing older in New York, without the stereotypes, without the limits, without whispering the word aging. My guest today is someone who I admire so much, who has spent much of his career redefining what it means to grow older, also shaping the industry's thinking about getting older. Michael is the founder and CEO of Raw Forward, a platform dedicated to the new longevity. He's also the former president and publishing director of Hearst Magazines, where he oversaw most of the iconic titles in the publishing industry. Michael is the author of Roar, The Second Half of Your Life. It is a book that inspires people to reinvent themselves and thrive as they age. I really loved it. Michael is also a marathon runner. He's run across 7 continents. He's a pilot, a photographer, and I just learned that he is a winemaker and a passionate advocate for a healthy aging. Michael, welcome to Aging Out Loud.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you always.
Yeah, it always is fun. Michael, you really inspired us, to do Boom. It was our experience with you and seeing this creative platform that you created with Raw and the summit, and how you brought so many different people to thinking about longevity. You built a career challenging narratives about aging, and what healthy aging means to all of us, and how you see it in an evolving society, in a society where aging is dominant. What inspired you to dedicate your work to this changing field?
There's so much, as you mentioned, I was in the magazine business. So I'm all about words and I'm about images and I'm about messaging. And we live in an environment now, it's changing because the population is getting older. We've lived in an environment that had a lot of ageism and a lot of ageist language and ageist imagery. And, it kind of reminds me way back when, prior to the women's movement, the way women were portrayed in advertising and in entertainment, and all of that changed in the course of the birth of the women's movement and other social movements, whether it was civil rights or other kinds. And now we're in what I call the new longevity movement. And so how do we change words? How do we say, instead of saying getting older, why don't we say living longer? Instead of saying age appropriate, why don't we say person appropriate? Because people have all kinds of ideas at all ages. Oprah Winfrey, our team launched Oprah's magazine. I mean, Oprah's 71, and you look at her today and you say, that's what 71 looks like.
Absolutely.
So our images of our celebrities and culture and so forth. So all of that starts to erode ageism. Self-imposed ageism is the biggest issue, because people say, well, I'm too old to do this or I'm too old to do that. And if we all are healthy and we live into our 90s, we're not too old to do a lot of things. So we're in this big shift right now, this big societal shift about the idea of living longer and what aging used to mean versus what it means today.
What you've done in this field, I think you're right. I think what we've done with ageism is, one, expose it.
Yeah.
And even though the numbers are growing, and we do believe that it will be tackled, but like all of the isms, it takes again and again and again. It's a re-education process. Almost every generation has to be reintroduced and re-educated. But what you've done is bring it to fields that were non-traditional fields. What inspired you to do that? And I want to go back to a phrase you used, which was um, personable. Make it personal as you age, and those are concepts that are not the norm.
Most of the conversation was being done in medicine, in academia, and it wasn't getting out to the people, so to speak. And where I felt there was an opportunity was in the business world, because products, let's just look at, how products are advertised. The images that we see in advertising, it's really important that we see positive images. The trope is always, you see this, man and woman walking into the sunset, heading into death. Versus they're playing paddleball or tennis. With our company, we work with over 50 brands and we help them to think about this. So, for example, Estee Lauder just brought Paulina Porzakova back into their world, and she's 60.
Yeah.
And she's an amazing looking woman. And she is sometimes with makeup, sometimes without makeup, but this is what 60 is. So I wanted to go through the business world because they're the ones who have the capacity. They spend money to show consumers what their products are and the images of those individuals. And it really helps people shift their own mindset about, what it means to be 50, 60, 70. Not every 60, 70-year-olds are alike.
Right.
They're all very different.
But the one thing that you've done, Michael, and I would love, this is your field, right? Your field is to help industries start rethinking itself, whatever it is, so that it could then market itself in new markets. What inspires you in your life to keep moving in this direction?
I think the germ of the beginning of it was when I was wrapping up my 40-year publishing career, which I really loved every minute, but I was kind of ready for the next thing. And everyone said, "Oh, you're going to retire." And I was like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this storyline. There's something wrong with this storyline because if you're 65 and healthy today and you may live another 30 years, you have the opportunity, if you choose to have a whole new life. You can have a new career if you want. You can put a new hobby in place. You can become an entrepreneur. You can work in the nonprofit. You can get remarried. You can run your first marathon. But it was really about this idea that at 65, I was far from finished. I still had a lot more things I wanted to accomplish. And so I created in my head this idea for this book. And when the book was bought by Simon and Schuster, I was sort of in the beginning, quite frankly, I got that off my chest. Yeah, move on. But then everybody kept saying, I can totally relate to what you're saying. And they're like, there's something here that's really happening across the society that I think is important. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier there was all of this scientific movement to keep us alive longer. What your movement is doing is to keeping us thriving longer. It's not just alive, because one of the things from my industry is making sure that you get the supports you need so that you can thrive. So that's the intersection with longevity. What I also value is that your view of longevity is a healthy, vibrant life, not someone who wants to just be 40 forever.
Correct.
So tell us a little more about that shift for you, and and ways that you've seen ageism show up, and how do you keep interrupting it?
So, ageism shows up everywhere, and the way let's talk about ageism in the workplace,
Right.
As an example. Companies, for example, spend, when young professionals get a lot of support. They get professional development, they get mentoring, if they're having children, they get maternity and paternal leave. They get a lot of love. And a lot of people in midlife, that's when it goes silent in companies. And that's when the ageism begins to creep in. So some progressive companies are beginning to instill more benefits to their midlife employee, which erodes ageism. Retraining, menopause services, caregiving, other things that are relevant for people in their 40s and 50s, because what many people will need to do is work longer because they're going to live longer lives, so they're going to have to make money in a longer period of time. And so the progressive companies are beginning to see that it's really a great benefit for them if they treat their 40, 50-year-old employees in a different kind of way. On the flip side, the individual can have a lot of impact on that by raising their hand and saying, I want to be part of an intergenerational workplace, or artificial intelligence is the new topic. I need to be trained and learned what that means. So It's on both sides, and when you do that, it erodes the inherent ageism that's in a lot of workplace environments.
So someone has been thinking about this a lot. What do you recommend to older adults how to stay healthy
Yeah.
and then how to stay connected in their
So,
community?
so you know, I call them longevity hacks. And the number one thing to stay healthy, regardless of your age, is you have to move and have exercise and have some kind of regimen in your life every single day until the last day of your life. Because as our friends at Weill Cornell Medicine say, motion is lotion.
Yes.
And it is, if you talk to scientists, doctors, they'll say it's the number one thing because having movement in your body makes your body function better, your organs, your cardiovascular, your circulation, but it's good for your head as well. Anyone can do that, regardless of where you come from, your background, your socioeconomic status. Anybody can do that. You can go walk your 10,000 steps in any given day. So I think that's really critical for healthy living. Sleep is one of those things that people don't pay enough attention to. It's really important for our physical and mental well-being. And once again, that's something we can control. Only 25% of our longevity is genetic. 75% of it is controllable by things like movement and good sleep and eating the right kinds of foods and engagement, societal engagement, companionship, relationships, going to the local community center if you live in a neighborhood that has that, or being with friends and family, really important, and having a sense of purpose. What is it? What makes you get up every morning? And it can't just be your children and your grandchildren. It has to be you and something that you're passionate about. It could be volunteering. It could be creating something, writing, going to a local creative workshop and in painting. But you have to find a purpose. And all of those things have been proven to give us a healthy longevity, healthy aging. And many of them we can do to the very end of our lives.
Some of your work and some of the things that we've gleaned from you led us to look at not only healthy aging, but also creative aging. Because creative aging is more than just taking a class. It's about the sustainability of building those, and nurturing those creative juices that you may have, whatever they are. And that is a major distinction. So talking about being creative, you run into a lot of great people, and you've encountered people who are redefining aging. Share with us some of the things that make them distinct and maybe not so distinct, and yet some of the things that they have in common.
So we call these people the reimagineers.
Yes.
So you can go on our website, roarforward.com, and see our tab of reimagineers. These are incredibly inspirational stories. You've met many of them yourself. They come from all walks of life.
Yes.
They have all sorts of ways that they think about life. I think some of the common threads that they have is they're very curious people. They're very future forward. They don't spend a lot of time thinking about, I should have done that. I could have done that. What about that? The past is the past. We all have a past. They're very future forward. They're very positive about the future and optimistic about themselves. So they share some characteristics which allow them to be creative in lots of different ways. So one of my favorite stories is a guy named Derek Phillips, and he'd be happy for me to talk about him. He was the vice principal of the New York City Public School. He started a program while he was in the New York City Public Schools called the Real Dads Network. And his idea was to create a support group for Black fathers who wanted particularly to be more engaged with their daughters. And they meet as a group, and the Real Dads Network, you can look up. They have a father-daughter prom, which they go to, and he's now transitioned and he does this work full time. And that's his creative outflow. That is what drives him and sustains him. Another person, I'm happy to share her name, is Peggy Silverstein, who raised children and was divorced ultimately and was sort of a painter, sculptor. But in her 70s, she started taking a welding class.
Oh,
And she became a welder, and she started creating these amazing one of her projects was working with the chains in elevators. She would get the old elevator chains, and she would create these amazing welding sculptures. She did one of this big, beautiful horse, and it led her to create a business where she creates sconces and lighting made out of horse heads that she welds. She's 80. And she's a
that's
brand
arduous work.
that is arduous work. And she launched a business at 81 called Light Horse Designs. And she's gotten into the equestrian community, and you can start at any age.
Right.
And she started this in her 70s. And so
No. He didn't Giorgio. He
if you
started at 60, became around at
Grandma Moses
right.
didn't start painting until she was in her 80s.
Julia Child's another one that started. It's like amazing.
Angela's Ashes, he didn't write that book till he was in his 60s, and he won the Pulitzer. So, there's all the creative path is available to all of us. We just have to identify what we like.
The enthusiasm which you share all of this is exactly why it is such a catalyst for other people to want to know more about it. Um, you emphasized the importance of intergenerational work, and at aging, as you know, uh, came out of the mouth of babes. They wanted a curriculum on ageism, and we were fortunate enough to have a resource guide on anti-ageism, and the public school has adopted it. Um, together we need to build a bridge between these two communities because they are what make this city. So give us some insights on how we could move that forward and ensure that we're not being ageist in our own thrust and desire for longevity and promote it.
First of all, I love that curriculum, so congratulations. I mean, really, it is a template that every city in America should pick up, and
Yeah,
every country should. I mean,
it's nationally recognized.
yes, no, it's
So
quite
yeah,
remarkable. I think one of the things is that, making sure that the generations are listening to each other. And I think oftentimes I always believed in something I call reverse mentoring. I would always seek out the 20 somethings in our company and say, "Teach me something.
mm,
Teach me something I don't know." In my world, it was the disruption of print to digital. And, when the digital revolution happened, I was, 50. So there was when it really had meaning, when it was really beginning to, and I'm not a digital native, as they say, and I needed to rely on younger professionals to teach me things and absorb them and figure out how it could work for our business. And I think there's a lot of value in listening to each other. Um, Younger professionals can bring a perspective, and older professionals can bring a perspective. And when you have around the table people of all ages from 25 to pick a number, 75, you get wisdom working with new thinking, working with let's try something different. And that's where the magic happens. So how do we institutionalize that? So one of the things that we did at our company was when we would have a table, we'd put together groups of people, and we would sit around the table with 25, 35, 55, 65, and we would pose a question or pose a challenge, and we would get a perspective and an answer on each table. And, the younger person had a point of view that might have been different than the older person, but it created this dialogue. And we ultimately got to solutions for things that had a lot of different input from a lot of different people. I think the big frustration is people don't feel they have a seat around the table to give their point of view, and oftentimes younger people aren't respected for their views.
ageism hurts everyone.
Right.
And so that we know that the skills and the value and the input of young people is cannot be overlooked
Right.
and cannot be ignored, particularly if you want to have an age inclusive city. So if you could imagine New York City 10 years from now, What would this age-inclusive city look like for you?
We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Singapore is the global template. They have multi-age interaction. They put a older people homes next to nursery schools, and so there's an organic, natural interaction. I don't like the idea of the 55 plus community. It's too ghettoizing. We need to have 25, 20-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 90-year-olds. And I think the beauty of New York City is we're almost built that way. Our neighborhoods are built that way. I love you taught me about Norks.
Yeah.
I love Norks. I think having age diversity throughout everyday New York is so important. Obviously, infrastructure is important because as our populations live longer, there are infrastructural things that have to happen. The role that I want to play is I have a great dream that as we're walking through the streets of New York and you're seeing advertising on buses and subways and billboards, you're seeing happy faces of all ages. And you're seeing, in a campaign, you're seeing a 25-year-old next to a 55-year-old, next to an 85-year-old, and they're all a joyous moment. And it gets back to being age agnostic, which you talked about earlier, so that it's just natural. It's not a gimmick. Everyone's going to hopefully grow old. Let's
Yes.
start there and be
Right.
healthy and grow old. But they're all going to be confronting some element of ageism. And we have to eradicate it as much as we can.
But we have to call it out.
Yeah.
And so what we're asking, I mean, what I love about this campaign is that it doesn't happen unless we call it out. And the few of us who know how to call it out, as long as we keep calling it out, other people learn.
Right. 100 years ago, when life expectancy was 62 in America, there were 7 million people in America who were 65 or older. Today, there are 60 million, which will grow to 80 million. And that sheer size of that cohort is going to require that the conversation changes. And by the way, the first millennials turn 50 in 4 years.
In 4 years.
So you got a huge generation moving into the 50 plus market. And I think that between the boomers and the Gen Xers and the millennials, they're going to force institutions, government, business, advertising, they're going to force change because they're going to say, if you want me, then you're going to have to rethink differently how you talk to me.
And people like you who write books like Roar are the Sherpas that we all look to lie that
Oh, I'd carry that on my back to get there. That's great. I love that.
to really help guide and inform us because you are a beacon because you have access to other industries that sometimes takes a little longer
Yeah.
for them to catch up, but you do it in a way that you introduce the profitability for them,
Absolutely.
which is fascinating. So I'm gonna give a little lightning round with you, right? What's your favorite, or could be your favorite city to grow old? Your favorite part of New York City to
My
grow
favorite
old?
part of New York. I always say live near a park.
Ah,
And every borough has a great park. Living near a park in a big city is so important for aging well because, well, the experience of just taking a walk in the park. I take my beautiful Vishla for a walk in Central Park in the morning, and it is invigorating in so many different levels. Also, I think a diverse community, in all definitions of diversity, I think is important.
absolutely. I always think about the experiment of Mitchell-Lama housing
Yeah. Oh, right.
and how Mitchell-Lama housing made poor people learn new values of middle-class values. It helped middle-class people co-live with poorer communities and communities of wealth.
For those of us who came from poor backgrounds, we learned about the importance of community and helping each other, literally with food and clothing and so forth. But I think New York has a lot of that because I think our neighborhoods have a lot of that.
Yeah, I remember living in East Harlem, with a working class community and a working class family. But I always knew the possibility.
Yes.
One word to describe how you are going to describe the future of aging.
we need to change the word.
Mm-hmm.
The word has to be longevity,
Okay.
because longevity has a positive. It's positive. The word aging has a lot of baggage. I'm going to get old. I'm going to be isolated. I'm going to be lonely. I'm going to be sick. No one wants to age. But people do want longevity.
They want to live.
They want to live a longer, healthier life. And so I think we have to reframe it. New branding.
Yeah.
We need to rebrand aging to become longevity.
I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
It resonates. We're in the business of saying words matter, right?
Exactly.
What gives you hope right now?
I say that what gives me hope right now is the role models of people 50, 60, 70, 80 are happening live. And the next generation is going to look and say, oh, that's what 60 can be. That's what 70 can be. Oh, Martha Stewart, she's 84. She's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. That's normal. We need to normalize that. So it's not a headline. It's just part of life. So I think the role models that are being created for the next generations are not only important, but that's what really gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. To our listeners, aging in New York isn't just about growing older. Obviously, it's about growing bolder. And we're going to start changing it. It's to dismantle ageism, to build a city that every generation thrives, where we all enjoy longevity. And if you want to learn more about this department, visit nyc.gov/aging. I'm your host, Lorraine Cortés-Vázquez, and I was here with the incomparable Michael Clinton. And until next time, keep aging out loud.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.